Good morning from Bear Country, California. I'm Dr. Caroline Heldman, and today is July 1st. It's the headlines for the first week of July 2021, and I want to focus on one headline. That headline is "Overwhelmed and Devastated. Cosby is free." And you may notice someone familiar in this picture. I'm going to focus on this one headline because this is something I have been working on for the past 5 years with Cosby survivors, making sure that they get justice. And justice was not served yesterday in Pennsylvania. The Supreme Court overturned Cosby's conviction on a technicality. Basically, he made a hush deal with a prosecutor, Bruce Castor. You may remember him as the rambling defense attorney for Trump's second impeachment. Well, he cut a deal with Bill Cosby in which he said, look, I won't prosecute you if you tell the truth in this civil trial. So Cosby then went on to tell the truth in the civil trial, in which he admitted to purchasing Quaaludes for women in order to have sex with them. There's another term for that. It's called rape. And so he admitted that he's a rapist in his deposition in the civil trial. And the argument is that under the Fifth Amendment, you have a right to not self-incriminate, and that Cosby wouldn't have admitted that he's a rapist in the civil trial had he not been promised that he wouldn't be prosecuted by Bruce Castor, the attorney prosecutor at the time. A new prosecutor comes in and a judge, and they look at it and they realize that there wasn't actually anything filed. Typically, when you have a deal saying that you won't be prosecuting someone, there's a case number, there's a filing. None of that happened in this case. What did Bill Cosby's defense team rely on? A press release from the prosecutor's office. So this will be the first time in history that a press release for a deal serves as the basis for the official verification of the deal, rather than a case file. So we have a lot of unusual circumstances here. But again, the Supreme Court overturned this on a technicality. Bill Cosby is an unrepentant serial rapist. I sat through two trials. I've read everything you possibly can get access to as a private citizen and beyond in this trial, and I can tell you his pattern is clear. 64 women have come forward, but there are dozens more who I have spoken to or know about, and they have not come forward. Over 3 decades, Bill Cosby systematically went through, professionally groomed these women, got friendly with their families, drugged them, and then engaged in some act of sexual violence. For some of the victims, he did it more than once. Why? Because he got away with it. He can act with impunity because he's not held accountable. So what does it mean that he was just freed after only 3 years in prison for dozens of rapes and sexual assaults over a 3-decade period? It means that he's still a threat. I worry about every woman who comes into contact with him, given his very methodic practice of grooming, getting to know their families, and then drugging and raping them. And the thing is, looking at the evidence and listening to his own words and the reports from the dozens of women he raped, this was a full-time job. I don't know how that man had another job at the time he was doing this, because he was very planful about it. So let me take you back to the first trial, right, in 2015. Here I am on the steps of the courthouse in Pennsylvania with, starting on the left, that's Linda Kirkpatrick, Cosby survivor, Lily Bernard, Cosby survivor. On the other side of me is Victoria Valentino, and on the end, on the right, is Therese Serengis, all Cosby survivors. That trial was really emotionally disturbing because there was one member of the jury who was a holdout, and I know in the end it was 2, but there was one who was giving Cosby survivors the stank eyes. He was leaving, raising his fist. It was very clear that he was not going to budge, despite the facts, despite listening to evidence from one previous survivor, and Andrea Constan. So that trial, it's a hung jury. So we go back to the state of California and we work together in order to overturn the statute of limitations for rape and sexual assault in the state. Now, it doesn't apply to the Cosby case, but Cosby survivors were so incensed that he wasn't getting justice that we were channeling our efforts into overturning the state law in California, which we successfully did. And here's Lily and her daughter Zion. And here is Ivy Bottini, who is also a co-chair of the work, who came up with the idea, LGBTQ plus activist, longtime activist, who has since passed away. This is Linda testifying against the statute of limitations, the arbitrary time limit on rape in California, in order to get it overturned in front of the state legislature. And we did successfully overturn it. Gloria Allred played a small role in that. She showed up and testified one day, and it was a powerful role. She throws around her considerable media influence and weight quite well in these cases. And then we went back, second trial. Some familiar faces, one new face, that's Liesl Lublin, Cosby survivor, who was one of the 5 who took the stand. So we're back at it, waiting in the early wee morning hours to get into the courthouse to observe the proceedings each day. You can see Gloria Allred was there, and in the middle is Bird Milliken, who is just a badass activist who engaged in a lot of theatrics and public displays in order to raise awareness about what was happening inside the courtroom. And in the back, you see Victoria with the sunglasses, and Therese Serengis is back again. And the man on the end is Roger. That is Lily's best friend from grade school. So the whole gang showed up to support Lily. And it was familiar the second time around. We weren't expecting any form of justice, but we definitely weren't expecting what we ran into, which I think were probably paid Cosby folks who just trolled Lily and the other survivors mercilessly outside the courthouse and even inside the courthouse. They were physically abusive, shoving and squeezing in when the officials weren't looking, just really abusive, yelling, screaming, getting in the faces of the survivors. It was an absolute circus. And again, I think they were paid only because they would show up at the same time they were talking to someone who appeared to be giving them money in the morning. And they also were from every different walk of life, but engaging in very similar actions. So I think Cosby likely violated the law in paying them, or his team did. A couple of days into the trial, we had a phenomenal thing happen. Nicole Rochelle, who was on the Cosby Show a few times and looked to Bill Cosby as a father, she showed up and did a protest topless through Femen, which is a feminist organization, a global feminist organization, and she wrote the names of all the Cosby survivors on her body. And she was, thrown into some bushes and arrested. And she had actually texted Lily to say that she was going to be there to show support. So we were looking for her outside the courthouse. We weren't expecting her to take such an incredible action and to be arrested. And we were talking with her as soon as she got released from jail, and then met her at her hotel room. Nicole Rochelle is just an absolute hero. Then the verdict comes down, and it's unbelievable that he has been convicted, guilty, guilty, guilty on all 3 counts. It is unbelievable to, I think, a lot of survivors, because, I work with hundreds of survivors over the years, and we just never get justice. There's never any justice for this. It's something that we say is a felony. We say it's a crime. We classify it as such technically, but then only 2% of rapists ever see the day inside a jail cell. And so we just, we don't actually take it seriously as a crime. I mean, imagine having that conviction rate for any other crime. We would be absolutely up in arms and pushing back against that. But for rape, it's perfectly fine, right? It's not something we bat an eyelash at. And so it was this moment where there was actual justice, and it was so unexpected. I had an emotional release. Lily had an emotional release. Vic, just floods of tears, because of years and years, and the pain of all of these survivors, that, you know, this symbolic nature of this trial, that survivors for the first trial in the Me Too era were actually getting some justice. And indeed, justice was served for 3 years. Justice didn't happen yesterday, but justice was served for 3 years. And the survivors, I mean, again, in disbelief, and it has everything to do with this woman right here, Andrea Constand, or Dre Constand. And this is a photo of her with one of the defense attorneys, Kristen Fedden, who, I mean, it was just a really emotional moment. And Dre was the only one of the survivors in the 64 survivors who was still within the time limit for prosecuting rape within the statute of limitations. There are lots of different ways we prevent survivors from getting justice, and statutes of limitations that are arbitrary, even though there's still evidence. Though that's one way in which we codify bias against survivors. And it's a bias against survivors because for most crimes, people come forward immediately, right? But survivors don't come forward immediately because it's the only crime where we put the victim on trial. Survivors are stigmatized. They're told it's their fault. In fact, they internalize this idea by and large that it's their fault. And so they don't even know a crime has taken place, even though once they get, you know, a little clear-headed a few months out, or perhaps a few years out, they can see very clearly that what happened to them is a textbook case of rape or sexual assault. So there's a reason why, many reasons why survivors don't come forward. The victim blaming, the stigma, and so having a statute of limitations for this particular crime actually does not make sense. So Dre Constand is the absolute hero with a cape in all of this. She's the one within the statute of limitations. But 5 other prior bad act witnesses took the stand, meaning that they're testifying to the same pattern of behavior. Lisa Lublin, Heidi Thomas, Janice Baker Kinney, Janice Dickinson, and Shalon Lasha. The absolute heroes of the trial. And we're still, you know, after the trial, sitting on the steps of the courtyard, or the courthouse in the courtyard, just really, you know, in disbelief that this moment of justice has been served. And for Lily, I mean, it's just, that was a really, you know, for all the survivors, just a pivotal moment. And I will say that yesterday was another pivotal moment. It was a gut punch. It was a reminder of women's place in our society. It's a reminder that 2 powerful men can have a verbal agreement, and that means that a man who absolutely destroyed the lives of many survivors over 3 decades, many women over 3 decades, that he gets to walk free. He gets to be in his house. He gets to enjoy life while his survivors got a gut punch, another, what Susan Estrich has called a second rape, right? The violation from the so-called justice system. So I will leave you on that today. I hope that as you head out into this holiday weekend, that you are being very gentle with yourself, and please check in on survivors. If you're a survivor, I love you, and you're not alone. Be kind to others and rock on.